And our next speaker is TJ. And TJ is going to do his favorite Roger Daltrey impression with Condor Who.
All right,
It's that one.
can we hear me?
Clicker. Do you know which buttons are?
No, I always have to figure it out over again because it's backwards from what I expect. Okay. All right. When I was fairly new on the Condor team, Todd comes to me one day and he says, Marona's decided he wants a tool that you can run on the EP that will tell whoever runs the tool who's using the EP. And you don't look very busy, so you get to write that tool. And so that was the original use case for Condor Who 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago now. I swear. Okay. Just a quick overview of this talk about the original use case of Condor Who. I'm going to step back a little bit and talk about the architecture of the EP because that will help inform what's going on with Condor Who and what it's for and how it does what it does. And then we'll talk about the strategy that we used originally 10 years ago. And then we'll come back and talk about why that doesn't work anymore. The modern use case for Condor Who and the new strategy as of the last 2 releases ago, 24.6, I think is when we changed this. All right, so the original Condor Who was who is using this EP? And by who, we mean which jobs, which APs. So if we think about what an EP is, conceptually, it is a thing that manages resources conceptually. You provision an EP, you say you have this many CPUs, this much memory, this much disk. You can create custom resources, of which GPUs for a long time was one. Now, GPUs are also sort of automatic. If we detect their presence, then the EP will manage them, but you can also just specify, I have this many GPUs. And then what the EP does is create slots. And each slot is a bundle of resources that an access point can claim and then run jobs on. So when we talk about who is using this EP, what we're really interested in here is what job is currently assigned to these slots when the slots are active. When the slots are not active, there's 2 possibilities. One is if it's a very old configuration using what we call static slots, the slot can be in existence and also inactive, but we don't care about those because no one's using them. If it's more modern, then when slots are not active, they also don't exist. And the resources go back to the big bundle of resources that the EP makes slots from, so that the next slot it wants to create, it can create that out of something. Another view of the EP here is much more detail-oriented. This is the sort of process architecture of the EP. So an EP is really an entire set of Condor daemons. There's the Condor master, which is a watchdog. It starts all the other daemons, makes sure they stay alive. There's the start process. That's sort of the core of the EP. It's the one that manages resources and thinks about creating slots. There's also a few other daemons under the master. The shared port may or may not be present. If it is, it's kind of important to the work that we have to do, because if you want to talk to a start D, you got to go through that shared port. And then underneath the start D, there will be a starter process for every active slot. And underneath the starter process, will be the actual job processes. And that could be a whole tree of processes or a single process. All right. So here's also some facts about Condor daemons that are going to be important to Condor Who. All the daemons under a single master should read the same config files. They all normally write logs into a single directory. And most of them, and all the ones we care about here for Condor Who purposes, have a command socket. You can actually send commands to Condor daemons if you can figure out their address. This figure out your address is kind of the hard part. So the original Who is using this IP. There's a couple of things that make this particularly challenging in the general case. If everything is opened and all the Condor pool allows Condor Who to query it, then this is fairly simple, you would think. We just figure out what the name of the EP is, and we run Condor status and tell it, please tell me about slots on this machine. But the collector may not actually respond to queries from the EP. In modern Condor configurations, it often doesn't. We may actually want information that the EP doesn't send to the collector. We don't tend to send to the collector, for instance, process IDs for jobs because that's not interesting off node. It is interesting to the person sitting on the node because then they can then follow that information up and look at things. So it's actually better in this case to query the EP directly. But the address of the EP, and by this, which I mean the command port to the Condor startd, isn't known locally. It isn't published anywhere but in the collector. And so what the Condor Who does is use this discovery strategy that is try a bunch of things and hope that we finally do figure out the address of the Condor startd. So first part of the strategy is we find the log directory. If Condor Who is in the same Condor installation as the EP it's trying to query, that's easy. It just looks in its own config file, finds the log directory, and then it scrapes through all those log files. Inside the log file, there will be the process ID of the daemon and the address of the daemon. This is something that just automatically gets written in the log file when the daemon starts up. If Condor Who is not querying the EP that it's part of, then if you tell it where the log directory is, it can still do the same thing. The other thing Condor Who can do is it can use various tools. So it can use PS to find processes whose name is Condor startd or Condor master. It can use netstat and LSOF to find out what ports daemons are listening on and then correlate that with the process IDs. And that will tell it what port it might be able to connect to. But all of this is driven by this need to find the address of the startd by any means necessary, and then basically run the equivalent of Condor status -direct queries to it to get it to return a class add for every slot, and then print information from that slot. All right, so the options for the basic Condor Who using this strategy is no arguments, in which case it will talk to the EP that is part of its configuration. If you pass -log and point it to the directory of a different EP, then it will do the same thing. It will scan the log directory. If you pass -pid and give it the PID of a Condor startd process, then it will use netstat and LSOF to try to figure out the command port. And these other two are sort of things that fell out of this project. So because Condor Who scans the log directory and gathers a bunch of information, and particularly it doesn't just get the address of the startd, it gets the address of all the daemons and the process IDs of all the daemons, and it knows whether or not the daemon at least believes it's alive because the log file says so. Condor Who-Daemons will just print that out. So instead of trying to talk to the startd, it'll just tell you what it discovered about the Condor installation. And then -quick, kind of the same thing as daemons, but it does that by querying the master and asking the master to tell it what it knows about its children. So these are of interest to people who manage Condor pools, but not necessarily, or not at all, directly relevant to the question of who is using this EP. Okay, so then we roll along for a decade or so. Condor changes, we make improvements. In particular, we turned on shared port by default, and in Condor 10X and especially 23, we changed it so that Condor doesn't automatically trust commands that originate from the same machine that the Condor daemons are running on. And all of a sudden, Condor Who doesn't work anymore if you are using the configuration that requires a token or some other kind of trust established in order to handle queries. And in particular, for glide-ins, this is the way glide-ins are configured. Glide-ins just flat do not allow Condor Who to query the Condor startd because it's not trusted. It's not coming from an administrator off node. Also, in the glide-in configuration, what has become more and more common is multiple glide-ins on a single machine. And so just looking for a single log directory doesn't work so well anymore. I guess I talked ahead of this slide. Is the new Who problem. It can be difficult to find the config files, still difficult to query the collector, and in the normal default glide-in case, impossible to query. And so what we had to do is switch to a new strategy. The Condor Who strategy now is to say, if I look in my log directory and I find an EP, assume it trusts me. But in the glide-in case, that won't work because you won't find a log directory, you won't find EPs in that. So instead, what it does is run PS to figure out which processes are Condor startds. Now it looks in the environment of the startd process, because in the environment of the startd process is enough information to discover the address of the startd. And, this is the key bit, a secret that can be used to send it commands. Now, if you are not root, you can't look in the environment of the startd process unless you are the same user as the startd process. So in the glide-in case, you can either be root or you can sue to the user that the glide-in runs on, which for most of our pools is OSG 01. If you are the one who set up the glide-in, I'm not sure what you call it, factory, front end, whatever, on your node, then you will know what this is. And if you're not able to sue, then you shouldn't be able to discover what Condor Who is doing, or discover what the startd is doing. Well, once again, once we get enough information to query the Condor startd, we ask it for soft adds, and we print the output. Now, in the glide-in case, things have also changed. We kind of want different information out of the startd than we used to in the olden days. So part of this new changes to Condor Who is we have also changed, I'll get to that in a minute, actually. So there are some new arguments to Condor Who. Actually, the all-peds argument was there already, but nobody really used it. There wasn't a good reason to. Now this will be the primary thing you want to do, is all-peds, find all the startds, query all of them. And there's a new argument that formats the output in a way that is more useful if you are looking at glide-ins and you are administering the execute node that the glide-ins are running on, as opposed to being a Condor administrator. And here is an example of this new output. I guess I should keep my pointer. So project, probably the most interesting thing, host name and job ID will be information that you might send to Tim because he's the guy who knows how to find those jobs on the APs, sorry. And then this is how long it's been alive, provisioned memory, provisioned disk, provisioned CPUs, and this efficiency number is basically CPU usage, right? So if this number is 2, you should expect this number to be less than 2. And if we're running sleep jobs, you expect that number to be 0. If not, we very often see it very close to 1 or however many cores are provisioned. Then the next thing is the PID of the highest, the first job process, the thing that the Condor starter actually launched. The actual job process is very often these days several steps down the process tree because that first process will often be apptainer and not the job itself. And so you do have to walk through this process tree if you really want to see what's going on in the job. And then this last one, this is the PID of the starter. This is interesting, not because it's an interesting number, but because there will typically be a directory on disk with that in the name where the job sandbox is. And that's first shorter than printing the job sandbox, and also information that Condor Who can get, as opposed to the job sandbox path, which it can't. All right, so questions? But first, you guys get to ask questions. I have a question for you. What information would you like Condor Who to show if it's not what we have right here?
So can you go back?
Yes.
So what motivated me in pushing the Condor Who is I am an administrator. Something is not to my liking. And I really want to know, how do I go back to the AP to complain?
Yes.
Or to figure out more, or to do something and to say the job number 27048,201 it caused the trouble, and I blah blah blah. So one thing which is really not a Condor Who issue, but a deeper issue, I would like to have an AP name. When you give me the AP host name, I don't really know what the heck it is. Okay, I don't know where to go to talk. You know, so we have to provide something associated with Condor. I don't have a solution, but that knows how to go back to talk or to email or something, so I can complain about this job. I think that as a developer and as somebody who is doing debugging, you really think about, how do I know more about what's happening on my node? But I want to make sure that you have an easy way to go back to the AP and say, what you sent to my machine is no good.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I should point out here, Condor Who, unfortunately, the slot ad that we query probably doesn't have Tim's phone number. But we could fix that, actually. We own the glide-in config. We could actually do that. But everything in the slot ad is available to Condor Who to print. This is why I can ask this question, what do you want me to show? The chances are, other than that, is something I could add or someone else could add to the Condor Who output.
It may be that all we have to do, I'm thinking here, sort of loud, is for Tim as the owner of the OS pool is to provide a website that says who is the contact for apOSGHTC.org. So you can go back and or something to deal with this misbehavior.
Right. I should also point out Condor Who does support the usual Condor toolkit of dash format, dash auto format, dash long, all of that kind of stuff is available if you do know what you want to grab and it's not in the standard output. All right, questions? Yes.
Thank you for talk and about the question you mentioned there. I do have a wish. So you know that I have some user who would like to know his job's running status, and he would like to know the detail about his jobs. For example, he has some parameters to variable change along with the job, and he would know that the number of that. So he asked me how can he get this. So I didn't provide him a solution, and at last he tried to modify the arguments of the Condor jobs there, and then he Condor -q to see the arguments changed. So I guess maybe something like Condor Who and can provide that kind of the variable for the jobs and let the jobs to write some numbers, I don't know, some other information, and he can query it directly.
Yes. So this actually would work. It's really complicated, but
sorry for that.
You can get information not just from the slot ad, but also from the job ad. I didn't show this, but there's an argument we can pass to Condor Who dash job, and it'll give you the job ad. Now that won't be the job ad identical to what it is on the AP, because the Condor Who or the start key doesn't know that. But it will contain information that is updated as the job runs, that is meant to be incorporated into the slot ad. Unfortunately, I did check for you, and it looks like we don't show the current memory usage. We only show the high watermark, and the same for disk. But we are talking about adding that because we really should show both the current and the peak. That seems like a very useful thing to know.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
TJ, I appreciate the new Condor Who, but I had a question. You mentioned the dash all PIDs flag. Is that the default behavior now, or do you still need to call that?
Condor Who does not discover an EP that it is a member of the same Condor installation, then that is the default, yes.
Do you think it should be the default even if it discovers?
No. Maybe. This is one of those things. If you're running on a Slurm node, then absolutely that should be the default. But that will also just happen naturally, because if you're on a Slurm node, you won't find anything in your log directory, right? So this just works. It might make sense for that to be a configuration option so that you can decide on a node by node basis. But if I log into one of our regular EPs in CHTC, all PIDs is a bad decision, right? And that's the other use case, the older use case, which is still very relevant.
Thank you.
All right, let's give TJ a round. Thank you, TJ.